Welcome everyone to our getting to the end here of the day, and we're going to have our transdisciplinary panel now, so we're really looking forward to engaging with some of our guest speakers. So our first panel member is our University CM, Patty Victor Switametelót, a co-director, Institute of Indigenous Issues and Perspectives, Indigenous Elder, part-time instructor of education here at Trinity University. Sitting beside her, and you've met her, many of you now, is Dr. Teddy Potter, Director of the Center for Planetary Health and Environmental Justice, School of Nursing, University of Minnesota.
Sitting beside her is Dr. Erica Grimm, and I'm really looking forward to hearing her voice as a professor of art, to add art to what we're doing here. Canadian artist of settler descent and professor of art. She's a grateful guest on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Stalo people. For more than 30 years, she has practiced attentiveness, and she did a talk on attentiveness earlier. And beside her is Dr. Sam Pimentel, glaciologist, professor of mathematical sciences, faculty of natural and applied sciences, and he works on wet things or frozen things, so he works on the ocean currents, and also the frozen thing's not ice cream, but it's glaciers. So welcome to the panel members.
I'm really looking forward to this. I actually love panels. I love actually moderating them, but I also like being on them. So it's exciting. So we've got some nice questions here to ask of our panelists, and we've asked them to go, respond within about 2 to 4 minutes so that we can hear perspectives from everyone. If you go a little bit over, you probably don't want to know what's going to happen. We'll deal with that later, Patty. All right. So I'm going to start with one of the first questions, and like I said, we'll start out with Switametelót, and then we'll go down the way here. And then what we'd like to do, time permitting, is to get some questions from our students and our faculty and other audience members. And again, I want to welcome those that are also live streaming. So we had 5 questions, and I think what we're going to do is one of our panelists actually went ahead and we gave the questions ahead of time. It's nice to think about them, and I am going to honor you, Patty, because Patty answered them all in one narrative. So that's fine, absolutely fine. I think what I'll do is I'm going to say the questions that you'll be responding to, and then we can go individually, I think, unless the rest of you have completed full narratives already. Okay. Well, maybe you didn't do your homework. Okay. So this is what happens at the end of a conference, right? We are kind of getting a bit happy here. Okay. So the first question was, what was the impetus for you to be interested in becoming a champion for the environment? The second question was, what do you think is the most important or pressing issues impacting our environment that must be addressed, and why and how? And then I'll just read them all for right now. How is planetary health connected to spiritual health? Why is science not going to save us from the planetary health crisis? Or what else do we need besides science? And the last question was, what suggestions do you have for how best we, as mindful citizens, can make our planet a better place to live, work, and play now and for future generations? Patty.
Eiswell Maquat, Saltremuth to Equala, Helmut, Tremuth, Stam to Ecliat. This is our land, and we need to take care of everything in it. Stolo people view land as a gift from Creator, and we have a responsibility to steward the land so that it remains a gift to the next generation. Land is not a resource to be used and abused. The land and the waters support our cultural and economic practices. The land is our teacher. The land is a source of memory for our people. Our traditional teachings of caring for the land include respect. When fishing, harvesting, and hunting, we consider those villages that are upstream from us and those that are downstream, ensuring that their needs are met. Generosity, providing for those who cannot provide for themselves, the elderly, the disabled, the single-parent families, providing for your community and then providing for your family. Humility, care for the land so that it is healthy and flourishing for the next generations. Our elders teach us that if the trees and the plants die, the earth will die. If the four-legged, the finned, and the winged die, the earth will die. If the two-legged die, the earth will thrive and flourish. Psalm 24, verse 1 declares, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." When we acknowledge God as the sovereign one, the creator and sustainer of life, we can live out the great commandments to love God and to love our neighbor. When we abide in God's love, we learn to walk and live in wisdom and peace. Peace with God, peace from God, peace with our neighbor, and peace with our land. Spiritual health impacts planetary health. Stellar teachings of Tomuyuk means that the teachings of our ancestors 7 generations before impact our lives today. And we understand that what we think and say and do today impacts the next 7 generations. We need to live in such a way that the land is a gift to the next generation. Switametelót to Equala, Homet to Muk, Stan E. Kalat, Kwasai.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask the rest of you we're going to go a little bit different, and just appreciate what you said so much. So what was the impetus for you to be interested in, gotta get close to this, in becoming a champion for the environment? And we'll start with you, Dr. Teddy, and then we'll go to Dr. Grimm, and then Dr. Pimentel.
Well, you've heard some of my story last night, but one of my earliest memories of interconnection was when I was about 3 years old in Montana. I spent the first 4 years of my life in Montana. It was a snowfall. We lived in the foothills. I remember how old I was because I saw my mom at the top of the hill holding my baby brothers, and I know how much older I am than him. So I was roughly about 3. I had slid down the hill on a sled, and it was nighttime, and like any child who doesn't want to pull their sled back up to the top of the hill, I kind of collapsed on my knees and looked up at the stars, and in that moment I went, because everything was connected. Everything was connected. The stars, my mom, my brother, the snow, the sled, me, everything was connected. And I was fortunate to never lose that sense of connection my entire life. Why am I active? I started being active as a climate activist first, but I became very tired and weary because I felt like I was fighting against something. And when I became a grandma, I started fighting for or working for a better future, and that's what planetary health is about. I realized that my great-grandmother had made decisions that allowed me to be present today, and now I'm making decisions that will impact my lineage for 7 generations, impact your lineage for 7 generations, your child that's about ready to be born. I am busy for that child. I celebrate that child. This is who we are. We are all interconnected.
Thank you.
Well, I have been influenced by 3 writers. Rachel Carson, when I was in university, I went on retreat and saw a film about her and became a vegetarian. It didn't stay. I backslid. But that was the beginning of it. My artwork has always been about embodiment, but I remember being so struck, and similarly, you had a unitive moment where you were struck with the interconnection of everything. I remember hearing a piece of data about how the levels of salt in the ocean, in our blood plasma, in our amniotic fluid, and in our tears are the same. The same saturation of salt is everywhere. And that piece of data kind of crystallized the connection to the ocean and then sparked my interest in the ocean. And then reading Alana Mitchell, Seasick, alerted me, woke me up. Although I'd known about, climate change, warming, peak oil, all the ways we described it for so many years, all my life, it was Alana Mitchell's book that really woke me up to the urgency. Living beside a green belt, I literally felt called by the forest and called by the ocean to learn about it. And then the third writer that really has profoundly influenced me, is Thomas Berry. And so Thomas Berry, Dream of the Earth, you had the privilege of meeting him, I understand. Such a prophet who anticipated and spoke so wisely. So those 3 writers. Thomas Berry said that the universe was a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. And that one phrase as well just spoke so profoundly, gave words to those unitive experiences of being in nature, whether it's beside the forest or beside the ocean, and feeling the presence, the fingerprint, the embedded creator, yet within the created order.
Thank you. It's maybe a little bit daunting to be called an environmental champion, but yeah, so I've always been interested in the outdoors, being out in nature. My academic background, I come from mathematics, so I chose mathematics, my favorite subject at school. And when I completed my degree, I was really interested in how I could use mathematics to learn about the environment and climate systems. So I did a PhD in ocean modeling, ocean science. And then after that, I did post-doctoral research in ice sheet modeling, in glaciology. And I think part of the motivation certainly was how can I use the power and elegance of mathematics to better understand God's creation. But the more I learn about the science and the more I comprehend the dangers of our current path and the need to steer a better way. So I think that's kind of where my motivation is right now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. That's great. Very interesting, different perspectives. The next question, what do you think is the most important or pressing issue or issues impacting our environment that must be addressed? And why and how? Okay.
That's a lot more than 2 minutes.
Well, we're not totally timing you.
As you know, I think everything's interconnected. So to try to find one thing that rises above the others is very impossible for me. So I would say the most pressing issue is to change our narrative. The human narrative that currently determines our policies and our decision-making in many non-Indigenous cultures is very flawed and very dangerous and leading us down a path towards end of life for really all of life. And so we need to remember what it means to be in right relationship, and make decisions based on what's good for, as I said, future generations. It is essential we address this narrative and realize that our narrative guides us in all that we do, and start working together, roll up our sleeves, find allies, and create this new narrative.
100%. 100%. Metaphors matter, and we've got to mind them. It matters whether you look at the water and you see a resource or you see a relation. And I think that's 100%. Although, the other thing that we could do is just simply stop fossil fuel combustion. I think that in the future, if our civilization lasts, people will be amazed that we squandered fossil fuels by combusting them. They're far too valuable to combust, given that there's a small, ever smaller quantity of them. So, the only thing I'll add to that, because we all know that the CO2 is warming the atmosphere, methane is worse, but the CO2 being absorbed by the ocean, acidifying the ocean, and, creating the stalled jet stream and the ocean atmospheric system, acidifying the ocean. I just can't get my head around this. Acidifying the ocean, putting the calcifers at risk, puts at risk half of the oxygen in the planet, meaning we will have an atmosphere like the top of Everest. In not so distant future, should the ocean become too acidic for the calcifers to survive. So the two lungs of our planet, being the calcifers, being the plankton in the ocean, and the trees, forests, on Earth. So either one of them or both of them put in jeopardy and get us closer to this tipping point. So why? Well, that's why and how. Leave the fossil fuels in the ground. Leave them in the ground and get over the tissy fit of global capitalism saying we aren't going to increase our profits next year. That is so short-sighted given the ramifications. Develop massive amounts of solar and wind and geothermal. It is the cheapest energy and the technology we have, the cheapest energy the world has ever seen. And we have the technology right now. All we need is the political will. Hydrogen can help store, as well as batteries are increasing, but hydrogen by electrolysis can help store. Blue hydrogen is a disaster. It's worse than oil and gas. So hydrogen via electrolysis can be a very huge help. But discerning, the path is important.
Thank you. I'm going to say climate change. I know that's basically everything, but still. So echo what the previous people have said. So we need to move away from the burning of fossil fuels. These carbon-intensive energy reserves have to remain in the ground. And as a global community, we must move towards net zero. And the sooner we transition, the better. The longer we delay, the more aggressive we have to be later on. And society can only change so fast. And essentially, we know what we have to do. The most effective solutions to halt climate change are a transition to renewable energy, so wind and solar in particular. And, who doesn't want cleaner air? There are other benefits to this besides climate change. And trees. We've got to reduce the conversion of forests and reforest. And again, who doesn't want more trees? The talk earlier this morning also emphasized the benefits of tree planting. So there's lots of co-benefits with these solutions, economic, health benefits.
Well, thank you, panelists, for excellent work on that 2-minute question. The next 2-minute question, remember 2 minutes? Just a little question here. How is planetary health connected to spiritual health?
I'm going to use my hands to describe this, see if I can do this and talk at the same time. You know, last night I talked about the interconnection of nature and humans. We are nature. And I would say my best understanding of how spirit, thank you, of how spirit and nature connect is I see spirit underlying all things. And matter's on top of that. And spirit comes up and it becomes a tree and a dog and a mountain, and then it disappears, and then it comes up. And so that spirit and matter connection is absolutely the same thing. And so it's really looking at the plants in front of us, the people in front of us, the wooden podium, and just celebrating that all things are spirit. So planetary health is a deeply spiritual practice.
Rilke once said, everything sings you, speaking to God. And by that he meant that we can yet feel and intuit and imagine the energy and the presence of the Creator yet within the creation. Elizabeth Barrett Browning said, the world is charged with the grandeur of God. Thomas Berry, the universe is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. And the great work of our age is to remember intimacy with the earth. Yeah, some communities have never forgotten it.
Yeah, this is a great question. There's obviously lots that can be said here. As Christians, we're called to have the mind of Christ. Our vision of creation should reflect God's own vision. God calls his creation very good, worthy of care and conservation. God is present in what he has made. The earth is the Lord's, but we are called to participate in God's governance of creation and to enact God's care for his creation. This planet, our home, is a wonderful gift from God. And as Christians, we should care about it because God does. The whole Bible can be seen, if you like, as a story of God wanting to dwell with us. So let's build a home worthy of God and his image bearers. God created this special place. He was present in the Garden of Eden. He was present in the tabernacle. He was present with the Israelites out of Egypt. He was present in the Holy of Holies in the Solomon's temple. He came himself among us in human form to dwell with us here on this planet. And even if you look to the eschatological vision of the New Jerusalem coming down from heaven, not to replace earth, but to transform it once and for all. The whole earth becoming the Holy of Holies, finally the home of God, the world without end. So that's the vision. And so notice it's a world where the natural and built environment are in harmony. So yeah, I think planetary health is certainly connected to spiritual health, because this is a place that God is deeply invested in, and God has a long-running and ongoing commitment to. So yeah, let's use our science, let's enact policies, and let's live lives that will allow all God's future image bearers to flourish here with the whole community of creation.
Thanks very much. That was very inspiring. So the next question comes from Sam and my discipline of science, dissing science here. Why is science not going to save us from the planetary crisis? And of course, Patty already started to answer this, so a few other answers here.
So here's the answer from a nurse. It is going to save us, but only if it works with the rest of us. Only if we find each other. Only if we share knowledges, we listen deeply to one another. Nurses rise to our full potential. Agriculture specialists rise to their full potential. Lawyers, jurors rise to their full potential. We are in this together, and science has part of the solution. So it's not that you're not going to help us. you're still on the hook to help us come together. But you alone are not going to be doing the solution.
Yeah. Again, I totally agree that science and reason are crucial, but they are not sufficient. That it alone, science and reason will only take us part way. I think that, and McGilchrist and Rowan Williams and other people make a really strong case for this, that the imagination and intuition, though they're often dissed or misunderstood or not understood well, or certainly not taught, are absolutely important. That the imagination allows us to see the potential of what's emerging and actually actualize it. The intuition, although it's usually thought of as some wow, woo-woo kind of, out there kind of thing, actually has an important role of integrating between 10 to 15 strands of knowledge and ways of knowing into kind of an organic, holistic whole. And although, one has to test the intuition and learn to use it appropriately, the intuition isn't going to give you the kind of fine-grained details that science gives you, but it's going to give you a really, really good general picture of the Gestalt that then one can dive into and take apart. So science takes things apart into little bits and understands it. That's absolutely necessary, but also necessary are the disciplines that put things back together into a whole, into a Gestalt, into a unified functional thing. Just think of when you dissected a frog in grade 7. That frog, God killed by that process. I hope, not really. Anyway, a metaphor and analogy can only go so far. But you have to put it back together and reinfuse the life and so, the way we pay attention matters, that we do the dissection, but that we also put the frog, as it were, back together and reinfuse life. So the intuition and imagination complement what the sciences are able to do. And even phrases like, in the Anglican Church, we often say, hear what the Spirit is saying to us, to the churches. And this is the work of the imagination as well as the intuition, to intuit and to open oneself to that layer of consciousness of the Spirit communicating and to imagine forward. And surely we can imagine a planet that's better run than this one. Honestly, there's going to be all kinds of positive things in a post-fossil fuel world. Lots of health benefits.
Thanks. Yeah, so climate science really has simply presented us with a suite of coherent scenarios, plausible future pathways that depend on policy actions. So it's up to us as a global community to choose which path we want to live out, to enact the policies and implement the changes necessary to meet those ends. So it's a political challenge, if you like, to encourage and implement change at local, regional, national, multinational levels. So I think for those of us fortunate to live in democratic countries, we must vote and advocate for environmental concerns to be high agenda items, and for political parties to provide us effective and pragmatic policies that can transition society away from fossil fuels.
That was a good question. You came up with that. I'm glad you asked it. But it looks like we're okay. So the last final question we have before we pose some, or give you an opportunity in the audience to ask some questions is, and some of you alluded to this in your presentations, but I'm going to ask it again. What suggestions do you have for how best we, as mindful citizens, can make our planet a better place to live, work, and play now and for future generations?
So I love that word mindful. I would underscore mindful and wake up every morning grateful grateful for what's around us. Some days I feel like I'm more cyborg than I am animal. I spend so much time in a two-dimensional world on a black and white screen, reading papers and grading papers and writing papers, and I forget this amazing world around me, this three-dimensional, six-dimensional, and incredible world around me. So it's about being fully mindful and watching the animals and their relationships to the trees. Right now I have a very annoying squirrel outside of my window, my office window. No matter what anti-squirrel bird feeder I buy, they still outsmart me. But instead of being irritated, I just look at this little squirrel with its little beady eyes in my window, begging for food, and I watch it. It's now busy licking the trees. When the sap runs and its food sources are drying up, it has a relationship with the trees, and it eats the sap and licks the sap off the trees and has enough calories to carry it through until the plants begin to bloom. It's a beautiful relationship. Can I too be in relationship that way? So nature is my greatest teacher. If I am not connected to nature, I'm disconnected from the source of all that is life in me. And it's really remembering that, and at the close of the day, closing it out with gratitude as well. Thank you for what happened this day. Thank you for the people that crossed my path. Thank you for the animals and the air and the water and the elements that allow me to be alive another day.
I've got a little list. Connect with nature. Listen to the earth, to one another, to your conscience, to what is emerging, to what is flowing. Trust your senses, your perceptions. Listen to your intuition and test it. Use your imagination to imagine the whole symbiotic, complex gestalt that is vibrantly alive. Remember that context is crucial. Mind your metaphors. Imagine your preperceptions, assumptions, and frames. Know that sometimes those frames are going to blind you. Be curious. Have an open mind. Remember that opposites are generative. Nothing is either or. Both and is usually true at a deeper level. Talk to your neighbors, as Catherine Hale reminds us. Be engaged. Learn the positions. Vote, but don't split the vote.
I'm going to echo some of the previous speakers. To enjoy nature, go out and be inspired by the wonder you see in creation. Encourage others to join you. Make climate change an important issue when you vote. Share your understanding, your research. Talk about it. I think as well to be positive. It's not too late to do the right thing. It's never too late to do the right thing. And most of the changes necessary will make our lives better. As the plenary this morning said, it's a win-win-win.
Thank you. I as a qualitative researcher, I listen to everyone, and there's certain words that came out: connectedness, gratefulness, imagine, inspire, and I think through everyone, share. Thank you for that. Thank you. So we're now going to just open it up to the audience and here in person to see if any of you have some questions that you'd like to pose to our panelists.
So thank you to the panel. This is a transdisciplinary panel. And I wonder if each of you or some of you could share just briefly, what are some of the best interactions you've had transdisciplinarily, like working with somebody in a very remote discipline from your own, and how that's come about and what kinds of things resulted from that? If you could just perhaps share that.
Okay, that sounds like an excellent question. Who would like to start? Okay.
I've had the great privilege of working with artists, scientists, nurses, educators, poets, curators, Indigenous knowledge keepers, all since I've been here at Trinity. And I've learned that as we collaborate together, that not one of us has all of the answer of even where we want to go, but to let the journey unfold together. And it's far greater than we can even think or imagine.
And I'm going to give a plug for the Planetary Health Alliance meeting, the one that's coming up in Singapore, but the past ones or in Malaysia, the past ones I've attended. Spectacular. I heard somebody speak who was circumnavigated the globe on a traditional Hawaiian outrigger. I heard a scientist who's doing a study of insects as our protein source. Somebody else doing citizen science. It's just so spectacular. And every bit of those seeds I collect along the way, and like a good farmer, I plant them in my own field, and amazing things grow.
You know, I started as an artist that would love to be in the studio by myself for like 8 and 10 hours at a time, like happy as a clam. And what I've learned over my life is that it's so much richer for it to be a journey with a group of people and a team. And so, you know, a recent project was a walking project with Alicia and Josh and Patty, and Sam came along on a couple of walks. We walked with experts along the Lower Fraser, the Stalo watershed, and listened and journeyed together. And Patty was a wise guide to us in our work. And and all kinds of things emerged that were far more than could be ever asked for or imagined.
So I've worked a bit with Erica. So it started with just conversations, didn't it? Just talking about our shared love of the environment. And then, I got the chance to have some of my equations on your art, which was very interesting. And I really, really enjoyed that process and being inspired by your art and the way that you thought about the subject. So, I certainly benefited from that, and I'm sure many others did as well. So.
I don't have a question quite ready to go, so I hope a question will come out at the end. And that is, I want to thank you, Erica, for mentioning what I think is a big elephant in the room, and that is global capitalism with its logic of overproduction, consumption, and profit being the bottom line to our actions. And I would like to hear what your perspectives are in terms we have already talked about the importance of changing the narrative. And if we change the narrative, and if we change our way of being in the world, ideally we would probably end up with a very radically different way of living. And that may not include like hopping on an airplane to go to a holiday destination, or even a conference for that matter. And so there, it seems to me like we have all these good intentions, but as long as we keep living within that logic of capitalism, of neoliberalism, and a free market, and the need to make profit to make a living, like how can that shift, and can the problems we face be solved, like that the problems created by like human technological advances with more technological advances or something, and there is something to that trade-off of that we want things to substantially change, but with the price tag, I don't know if people are prepared for a very different way of living. And so any comments that you have on that elephant in the room, that would be greatly appreciated. Yeah.
When I consider where our world is today, and I take a look at most of it, I can point to the colonial attitude towards how we define success, how we define progress. And so when I look through our territory, I see that And one vivid picture is the draining of Sumas Lake right here within our territory, and how I was rejoicing 2 years ago when we had a flood because the lake became a lake again. And I know it was inconvenient for people, and I know that people were stranded on either this side of the flood or that side of the flood. But I was waiting to see how we were going to fix this problem, because I was rejoicing because God created it as a lake. And who do we think that we know better than God? That it should be a lake. And yet in the spirit of progress and in the spirit of this is the modern day world, that we need to get a bigger way to drain the water from that. And so really disappointed in that. Recently, I had the privilege to go to Maui, and I know people are saying, well, why are you going there? Because they just had a fire. But I felt the call of God to go, and I went, and my granddaughter and I actually went and drove through that area because we were allowed to do that. And what I was hearing from the people is that developers were wanting to clean up the mess as quick as they could and get building. But what I was hearing from the indigenous people is let's take the time, let the land heal. And so some way we need to come to a place where there's giving opportunity for healing to happen, and so that it can grow and to flourish.
You asked a wonderful question, even though you doubted whether it would come out, so thank you for asking. I'm not an economist, but I would recommend to people the book Ministry of the Future. It is probably one of the most incredible books I've read. It's by Kim Stanley Robinson, and it was President Obama's one of his favorite books. And it looks at all the various solutions that will, if put into place, there are things that we know right now, if put into place, what would life look like? And I can tell you in the beginning of the book, when the solutions aren't in place, I'll give you a trigger warning. That first chapter is pretty scary. But by the end, when you see these solutions put in place, it's like, we can do this. We can do this. And part of the reason why I'm answering it this way is there's an economic shift and an economic model as part of the solution.
I think Thomas Berry really, again, said it succinctly and really well, that there will be, actually it was Mark Carty who said there will be no economy unless we get climate change right, but Thomas Berry said that every discipline, including economics, unless it prioritizes the ecology, will collapse. And really, when we look at, capitalism, it's built on a false economy because there's nothing in the bottom line that includes the environmental damage it has been and is being and continues to be doing. So we have this attitude that we can do whatever we want with the earth. But in fact, what the huge shift, and this is the biggest reorientation our species has ever had to grapple with, what we have to grapple with is that we have to allow the rhythms of nature to become a part of our life and our energy grid. The energy grid with solar. We have the technology to send it all across the country. We don't actually have to have times when we have less energy from solar. But honestly, when you think about it, would it be so bad if we were to moderate our activities in accord with nature once again? We probably would be healthier and have better sleep patterns if we did that. What would be so wrong about moderating and living in sync with, in tandem with the natural rhythms of the earth again? Honestly, I think that's part of what we're called to rediscover intimacy with the earth, is to be aware of the earth rhythms and honor those earth rhythms in our actions. That is a big, huge shift. It's a power play to simplify things enough to use them does not mean we understand them. And to simplify, to use, is the biggest power play there is, but it doesn't mean that we understand the full complexity. So to simplify, to use is what capitalism does and what the mechanistic worldview does. Simplifies everything only to use, to grasp it, to be used instrumentally, but not to understand the depth of the ramifications of those actions. And understanding the ramifications are hitting us in the face with the fires and the floods and the winds.
This is obviously totally outside my discipline, but I guess I would urge that the solution, where we're at now, the solutions have to be pragmatic. They have to be effective solutions that can be implemented right now. So I guess, as part of the transition, maybe capitalism is modified or changes and we move towards a circular economy or something like that. I could see those changes happening, but I think with our capitalistic structures right now, we need to make changes right now with what we have, because we need to be making changes now. And so I guess I would just urge pragmatic, effective, immediate solutions that we can implement now. And, perhaps by the end of the century, we have migrated, as we've transformed society, into a society that is not driven just by GDP growth. Yeah.
Well, that's the conclusion of our panel. I want to thank all of you for just your inspirational, insightful. You've given us some hope as well. We really know that there are solutions to this, and just appreciate all of your perspectives. So we can just give a round of applause for our panelists.